Exploits Part 2, Windows. In this nugget, we'll be discussing Windows exploits, and we'll start off with just a couple of well-known attacks, the Shatter attack, as well as the RPC DCOM attack. Now, these aren't the only two attacks against Windows, but they're very widely used and very popular among hackers. There's probably dozens of other ones out there. So I'll show you those, and I'll show you some practical demonstrations. I'll show you how to create a rootkit and put a rootkit on a system that makes it virtually impossible to remove it. In fact, if someone ever did find out that they were subject to that rootkit, man, I think the only solution is probably format C: or something like that, because it's virtually impossible to detect that rootkit once it's on the machine. So you want to make sure that you erase any traces of it. I also, at a lesser level, I show you how to launch a command prompt so you can access a Windows box remotely, and you don't have to have administrator privileges to be able to do it. However, once you do launch that command prompt, you'll have full administrator type access, and you can do whatever you jolly well please. All right, the first thing I'm going to do for you here today, before we even go any further, is just give you a total gift. This is going to help you a lot in trying to hack into systems. And here's the issue, really. You see, a lot of administrators, when they get a piece of networking equipment, especially if it's a large rollout, and they got dozens of new switches and routers and all those kinds of things, is that it's easy for one of those items to slip through the cracks and for the administrator to neglect or forget to change the default password on that router or on that switch or hub or whatever it is. Well, most of these devices will ship with a default user ID and or password. And since it's easy to forget to change one of those, somebody who knows that user ID or password will be able to potentially hack into it and change the routing rules or whatever they want to do there. Plus, sometimes it's just that, us administrators can be kind of stubborn sometimes, and we're a little cynical. I mean, just picture the administrator in the small office up there in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, saying, yeah, those guys over at corporate in New York, they think they know everything. They sent me this router, and they gave me all of these detailed instructions on how to set it up. I know how to set up a router. Now, how do you plug this thing in, by the way? You see what I'm saying? So they might not even know. They might let their pride get in the way. Here's what I'm trying to get at. I'm sending you this website. This is also going to be included in the downloaded for the favorites that I pointed you to earlier in our last nugget. But this URL here is in the favorites list that I'm going to include in the zip file up on nuggetlab.com, and it has the default God password for every one of the devices listed here, clear down to consumer level, professional level. You got your D-Link items there. You got dictaphone. I don't know if anyone uses dictaphone anymore, but anyway, HP devices, all kinds of stuff here. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And this is a fairly maintained list. They're still looking for other people to maintain it. But if someone comes up with a new username and password for a new device that's just come out, they send in the information to this website here, and it gets posted. As we get started here, let's talk about a couple of common kinds of attacks or exploits that can be taken advantage of within Windows. The first one was really revealed to us by Microsoft itself unknowingly. A few years ago, Vice President Jim Alchin of Microsoft made a statement during an antitrust trial, of which they've had many, and he said that there were so many flaws in Windows that they would threaten national security if the Windows source code were to be disclosed. And along with that statement, he also mentioned something about message queuing, which was a big part of the security problem there. Well, that got people to thinking. That got a lot of hackers thinking, message queuing, what's the big deal about message queuing? What could that possibly be? Well, first of all, message queuing is when applications are controlled. Actually, it's applications within Windows that are controlled through the use of messages. That's how things work within Windows. For example, if I'm in Microsoft Word and I press a key, I just press, what is it, F12. That would do a save as command, right? Well, if I press F12, that's going to send a message to the current active window, which tells that application which key I pressed, F12. Well, if this message is then going to be placed into a queue, and it's going to be processed in the order determined by the application. And, of course, applications are typically fast enough, and hardware is fast enough so that it can run them pretty quickly and we don't have a backlog. But that's not the point. The point is there's no way of identifying whether or not something that's been sent into that message queue is for good or for evil. There's no distinction in that. So there's a message queuing vulnerability there. And there's no way to distinguish those messages. I might send a message that just says F12, save as. There might also be a message that's sent that has a malicious payload. And the windows that we're sending these to, the message windows, don't really have any way of discriminating and saying, ooh, that looks suspicious to me. I think I'm not going to accept that packet, or I'm not going to accept that message. So as a result of that inability to discriminate there, malicious messages can be forced to an application, and the application just has an open window and it says, hey, I'm the active window, I guess I should accept whatever's being sent my way. Well, that application can be running under the administrator account, and then if it's properly exploited, whatever has been sent to it can assume that identity or assume all the privileges of the administrator account, which is one reason why it's always advisable for people not to stay logged on as a local administrator or as a domain admin or something like that. Because if you do get hacked, they'll have all the same privileges that your account has. Now also there's something about a system account that's even more powerful than the admins or domain admins or enterprise admins, however you want to say it. And that is because the system can get to certain things that we as humans can't normally see, such as the ntds.dit file, which stores the database for Active Directory. We can see that exposed in Active Directory users and computers, but we can't directly touch that file or its contents or manipulate it. Other things are things such as the system volume information. If I open up a hard disk here, I'll show you what I mean. So if I go to this data drive, for example, see that system volume information? I'm logged on right now as a member of the domain admins group, which is also a local administrator, but if I double click on that, access is denied. No matter what I do, I will not be able to change that. I can't even change the permissions to allow me in there, but the system could. So if there's something sensitive or useful in there, if I use the shatter attack to assume the system identity, then I'm good for that. And then there's also another kind of an exploit. This one is something that I'm going to show you here shortly. This is called the DCOM RPC, the Distributed Component Object Model Remote Procedure Call exploit. And sometimes you'll see these reversed, RPC DCOM. Just depends on who you're talking to. Anyway, these are exploits on the following ports, 139, 135. Now let me pause right here. 445. Does that look familiar? What kind of ports is that used for? Well, that's used for file sharing on Windows operating systems. Older operating systems just used 135, 139, 137, those kind of ports. Newer ones will use 445 for current Windows clients starting with Windows 2000. In any case, there's something called an RPC endpoint mapper, and it listens on these ports so that it can service sharing requests. Well, in any case, and also port 593. Well, in any case, these are vulnerable to a certain kind of an exploit, and this, in fact, is how the blaster worm got to be so nefarious back when it was popular, if you want to use that word. In fact, if you really want to see how dangerous this DCOM RPC attack is, how about I just go ahead and show you. One of the first things I'm going to be able to do here in order to exploit this RPC DCOM, that's actually called an overflow attack, is I'm going to use the Trivial File Transfer Protocol. This is an excellent way of transferring files to a compromised host because it doesn't require authentication. It's kind of an under-the-radar way of transferring files. So what I need to do first of all is to start the Trivial File Transfer Protocol daemon here on my Linux box. And so I've already typed in everything I need to type in there, and it's gone ahead and started that for me. Next thing I'll do is I'm just going to confirm that this is actually running, so I'm just going to do a ps-a, grep in order to filter my results, grep for AF or AT, FT, P, D. Okay, and we see that it is indeed running. Okay, the next thing I need to do is to change directories, so I'm going to go to USR local on this virtual machine, and I'm going to go ahead here and run an exploit. I've already actually worked with it, but what I would do if I hadn't already worked with it is I'd type gcc oc 192-dcomc followed by a -o, not a 0 but an O, and then DCOM tac. Okay, and what that would do is it'd use the new compiler, a GNU compiler, to be able to put this file together for me, this DCOM attack file for me. Once that's been put together, I'll backspace over all of this because I've already done that at some point in the past. Then I'll just do a //DCOM attack, and then I'll follow by a -d, and then I'm going to enter in here the IP address of my Windows target, and that's this Windows box right here at .42. So, oops, wrong machine here. So I'll go back over here, and it's going to be 10.10.10.42, followed by a -T0. Now let me also explain what these things are. A -D just identifies the host name that I want to attack, and I follow that with the actual IP address or host name. And then a -T0, that means a T is for type, and 0, which is the default anyway, that identifies a Windows 2000 machine. A type 1, or T1 in this case, would be a Windows XP type of a machine. So in any case, I've typed all of that in, and watch what's going to happen once I've done all of this. Because what we're going to see is we're going to see our worlds collide. Watch this. Press enter, and it's doing something or another there. Hey, wait a minute. Isn't this my Linux box? Yeah, it says shell console. Wait a minute. Let me go look at the desktop. Now, this is my Linux box. How come it says Microsoft Windows 2000, WinNT System 32? Guess what? We've just run the DCOM exploit on this destination computer. We are now at the command prompt on that Windows Server 2003 machine, 2000 machine remotely. So I can do anything I want to. I can use a net user, add, and I can add user accounts. I can change group memberships. I can work with the file system. I can copy confidential files off of the system. I can send them up to an FTP that I've hijacked somewhere. I mean, there's just no limit now to what it is that I'll be able to do. Also, by the way, I'll just do a dir just to prove that we can see something. We're looking at all the files on that local computer right now. Also, look at the desktop on this Windows 2000 machine. If I'm actually sitting at this machine, happily doing my daily network administration, I would never know that I am being compromised right now. Now, one thing I could do is if I'm a knowledgeable administrator is I could go to my own command prompt here. If I say, something's not looking right, maybe I'm being attacked or something, then I just go to my own command prompt here, and if I do a, what is it, netstat, couldn't think of it for a second there, netstat, then I look at these addresses here. It shows the, the ports that are open and stuff like that, and this one just says Doom. What in the world is that? That's port 666. No coincidence there, by the way. So it just resolves it as Doom, because that's the port that normally the Doom servers operate on. So it just translates it with a name right here. Well, it just so happens that I'm actually using that exploit across that same port. So now when I see that on there, I say, whoa, something's going on. I better close down that port, or get on my firewall or something like that. And then I could do the same thing from here, by the way, just to confirm that I'm on that port. Netstat. And here again also I would see the same information identifying the same exact ports, including this Doom port. Now the next thing I'm about to do here is I'm going to go ahead and use the Trivial File Transfer Protocol, and I'm going to go to identify this IP address, 10.10.10.46, which is the local computer that we're looking at here. That's my Linux box. And I'm going to get pwdump2.exe. Now what do you think I'm going to do here? Of course, I'm going to try to get a dump of the entire passwords database out of the SAM on that destination machine, and then I'm going to be able to crack them. Now the main idea here is I want to just use pwdump to get the hashes. Then I'll copy the hashes to my local machine or somewhere else and crack them offline. Okay, and the reason for that is because you don't want to crack them online while you're really connected to the server, because you want to do it in kind of a hit-and-run fashion. Get in, get what you need, get out, so that you have less chance of being detected. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type in this command for the pwdump. It was able to transfer that file successfully, and we'll move on to the next file that we're going to need. Now, the other file I need, this is samdump.dll. That's a DLL that's associated with pwdump2, and it needs that file in order to work. So I'm going to transfer that file up there as well. Let me confirm that they are there. dir pwdump. I'll just do an asterisk. And there's my pwdump2 file. And then I'm going to do a samdump here as well. dir samdump.dll. Sure enough, that file is also there. Okay, so, and CLS doesn't work, by the way, in this. And also, up and down arrows don't work either to repeat commands. So if I wanted to repeat one of those commands, I just get, a bunch of gibberish. That's one of the drawbacks of this kind of a shell, but that's all right. I'll live with it. Okay, now the next thing I want to do here is to do pwdump2, pipe that out to, or send that out to, passwords.txt. And press enter. And now I've got a passwords file there. If I want to just confirm the contents of that, I'll just type the passwords.txt. Sure enough, looks like a whole bunch of hashes there. Now what I'll do is to transfer that file to my location. Before I used the get command to send files from my computer to that destination Windows computer. This time I'm going to use TFTP again. And I'm going to again identify my own IP address here. If I can type this out right. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that there. I'm going to use put to grab the passwords.txt file. And now I've transferred that successfully to my own system. And then all I have to do now is to crack those passwords using something like John. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and just go to a different command prompt here. And I'm going to go change directories to John, something. Yeah, there it is. And then I'm just confirm that I've got the file that I need there. All right. And still need to go to the run directory. Okay, now what I'll do here is to run John against the passwords.txt file. So .john/John/TFTP/passwords.txt. And I'll let John do its thing. Look, it's already cracking passwords. It's figured out user 05's password. It's figured out the Bob's password, Big Admin Bob. It's found the password here of chocolate, it looks like, for user 04. So it's getting started cracking some of these. They're not completely done. Some of these words aren't complete yet, but John's able to crack portions of this and work on the rest of it later. So I can just let this run overnight. Again, now this passwords.txt file is actually on my own local computer, and if I really wanted to cover my tracks, remember, hit and run, then I'm going to just delete pwdump star.star to delete all of those files. Actually, it won't let me now, will it? And sometimes we'll still run into that because of file permissions on the destination system, but, we could do something like rename them to something innocuous or something, rename pwdump2.exe to nothing.txt, so I could rename it. Now I've renamed it, and it looks pretty innocuous. I could do the same with the DLL that I copied up there, and certainly with the passwords.txt file. I want to rename that to something, so I'll just call that, everybody sees README files all over the place and everybody ignores them. So nobody will ever read the README file if I can't delete it. All right, now there's only one problem with this, and that is, even though I'm pretty adept at the command line after working with Linux for a while here and everything, I still kind of miss my Windows graphical user interface from time to time. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if I could have that back and hack that remotely as well? Well, that wouldn't be possible, would it? Well, of course it would be. Now, let's talk about how we would do that. Now, first of all, I need to, again, use the DCOM attack exploit, if I haven't already gotten that, to launch a shell. Now, here I'm in a shell on my Windows machine, so I don't really need to run it again. I will point out as a side note, however, if you want to break out of this Windows shell remotely, just Control-C to get yourself out of it. Now, on the destination side, on that Windows server, it will have RPC broken at that point, and it won't be working. Nobody may notice for a long time, or nobody may ever notice. It just depends on whether anybody's going to need it or not. If you have control of it in some respect, then if you do break the connection here, you should reboot that Windows 2000 server. In any case, everything's still copacetic for me here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a couple of other things. I'm going to go ahead and use the trivial file transfer daemon if I haven't already got that started, and that should still be running from our last attack. Okay, so now we're ready to get going. I'm already in the appropriate directory that I need to be, so I'm going to do a TF. And I'm just going to, what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause in between these so you don't have to watch me type so much. So I'll type in the LAN and then we'll explain it. All right, once again, and I'm not concealing anything from you here, the whole thing crapped out on me again. So I rebooted both machines, and I'm now able to type these commands that I told you I was going to type in. And you can see that up here at the top. It's kind of funny, I think, how this DCOM overflow thing gives you a bling bling, when you go to the Windows box. Anyway, I got back to the Windows box, trivial file transfer protocol, transferred the files that I need for something called WinVNC. Now, what is WinVNC? This is a utility that you can use to get a graphical user interface from one side of the network to the other, or one side of the world to the other. It's a lot like remote desktop. Now, this is not really just a hacker's tool. A lot of places use this because it's free and it's pretty widespread. It's probably used by millions of people throughout academic institutions, industry, privately, wherever. So it's pretty broad use, but it can definitely be abused, as you're going to see here. So as we get going here, let's take a look at what we can do. The first thing I need to do is to register this application in the registry over on that Windows machine. So I'm going to go ahead and let that happen. So I'm going to press Enter here. And we see that regedit has now silently registered that in the registry over there. That's what the /s is, by the way, if I remember right. That's for the silent option. And the purpose of that is we don't want a dialog box to pop up over on that server saying, hey, somebody just edited your registry. Because otherwise it gives you a confirmation message with a big OK on it. Kind of a dead giveaway to the fact that they're being hacked right there. So next thing we'll do is when vnc-install, we're going to install that application. Net start WinVNC, that's the service for this particular application over on that Windows box that we've just now placed the files over there for. And now that that's up in a new terminal over here on my Linux box, I'm going to go ahead and type VNC Viewer. And yippee, it actually looks like it's made a connection here, or at least it's trying to. So what I'm going to do at this point is to enter in the password, okay? Well, actually an IP address, so 10.10.10.43. Is that the right one? No, 42. 42, and then it asks me for the password, and I type that in, and now, wow, it doesn't get much better than this. My mouse is kind of wacky. You notice that I don't have that quite the same there, but I have an entire desktop for a Windows machine here. I can just double-click on, I don't know, my computer, browse through the file system if I want to. I can, what else can I do? I can go to Active Directory users and computers if this was a domain computer, and then I would, as a result, I'd be able to add accounts. I might add myself a backdoor account just in case I get kicked out and get caught. Just create an innocuous account that gives me some rudimentary access, and then I could, download things to it, or use that account to download stuff or something. So you see that I can pretty much get whatever I want to here now. I can right-click my computer, go to Manage. It's a little sluggish here. It doesn't respond quite as fast as if it was a live machine. So there's a little bit of latency in what I'm telling you here and all this stuff. But I could go down here and take a look at various performance logs and alerts. I could go down here and look at users, groups, that's what I was looking for, services. I could go down into the services here and add and start or stop and start services that would otherwise not be running. So that's kind of handy because typically for network administrators for the Windows world, we try to stop any applications that don't actually, or any services that don't really need to be running. Well, as a hacker, I like to start as many services as possible, so I've got lots of toys to play with. And look, for the ultimate in denial of service here, I can even click Start, Shut Down, and shut down this computer. Now there's denial of service. And that's pretty much all. So it's now going to shut that machine down, and we're done. All right, now here I've restarted my shell in a different session here. And what I'm doing this time is I'm going to use a utility called netcat. This is a really cool utility. It's just nc.exe is the name of the executable. It's supposed to be used as kind of a telnet replacement, but it's also able to keep running on the destination computer in listen mode and wait for connections, and then it'll bind to that connection, and then it can launch again cmd.exe, allowing us to send commands to that target host. So just another way of being able to get to that machine, although I will say that netcat tends to be more stable than previous methods that I've seen before. Like the shell that I've launched from this DCOM attack. This is not quite as stable as you've seen a couple times here in the past, but the netcat cmd.exe is pretty stable. Okay, what do we do here? Well, first thing we do is, I typed this in wrong there, so let's take a look at this one is the right one. TFTP, that's the internet address, that's 10.10.10.46, that's this local computer, this local Linux box, and I want to get this file from this local Linux box. By the way, any of the files that I want to transfer from this box to that destination have to be in this directory here, and that's the TFTP directory. So there's my nc.exe file, and I'm transferring that right here. Okay, so I'll type that command in. Transfer was successful. Next thing I want to do is to actually run the netcat command, and I'm going to run that on port 999. Notice that it's also, that's the P for port. Notice that it's also going to be in listen mode. That's what the L is, and this is what we're going to execute is cmd.exe. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in, and now it's just going to be listening for a connection. All right, now that I've got that listening on the other side over there, I'm going to go to a console over here, again, on my Linux box, and I'm going to say I want to use netcat, and I'm going to want to use that on 10.10.10.42. I want to connect to that Windows box at that IP address, and I'm going to connect on port 999, and then there we go. There again is my command shell, because I told it before that I wanted it to run cmd.exe. And again, this particular command shell using netcat is going to be more stable, more likely not to bomb out on me. And by the way, another advantage of netcat is it's typically not detected as a virus or spyware or something like that, so it's a really good tool to use for that purpose as well. Now here I've returned to the VNC viewer, and I've done this for a specific purpose. I forgot to show you something earlier, but there's a couple of reasons why I'm here. Number one, anything that I do from within this window on my Linux box in the VNC viewer will also show up on the destination. So, for example, if I open up, Internet Explorer here, then watch what happens. When I go over to that actual physical machine, and I click over here, we see that, yeah, we got the same thing. The same thing's going on. If I resize it over on this side of things and I drag the window down back on my Linux box, sure enough, same thing. So all that stuff is mirrored back and forth between the two of them, which has obvious implications, and that is that if there's somebody in the server room or something watching the monitor where I'm doing all of this, they're going to see that somebody's hacking into them. Just a little too obvious that way. So that's one reason why, if possible, I like to use the VNC viewer only on headless servers. And if you're not familiar with that, that's just a server that basically has the operating system, whatever applications it runs, but it doesn't even have a monitor attached to it. Everything is done remotely through, remote desktop or some other kind of means, telnet, that kind of thing. Now, once I'm here, however, what I want to do is to work on another tool. This is going to be a rootkit that we'll use for Windows 2000, and this is something that we call Hacker Defender. Now then, briefly here, I'm just going to point out something else that we can use. This is something called Hacker Defender. This is a rootkit for Windows. This is really a very, very powerful rootkit, and it's very capable of hiding itself from Windows processes. You can use it to show more hard drive space available on the hard disk than is really available. And this might be useful if you're stashing a bunch of large files on that hard disk and you don't want to arouse suspicion because an administrator looks at the hard drive space and says, "Oh wow, man, we're losing gigabytes at a time." Well, no, because we're going to falsify the amount of free hard disk space that's available there. Other things we can do are to hide certain applications or any indication that Hacker Defender is running, and we can also leave a backdoor. We can use, again, a special password that we come up with that is going to allow us to access this remote system anytime we want, regardless. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm not going to exhaust this utility because there's quite a lot to it, but just basis of this really goes to this hxdef100.ini file. Actually, I can just double-click on this. And this opens this up in Notepad. Let's go ahead and review a little bit about what we really have here. First of all, it identifies a few things, such as what the hidden services are. Anything that starts with the word Hacker Defender, and then there's the asterisk there, this will be a service that does not appear. So we're going to conceal it that way. Other things that we'll see that are going to be concealed are the names of any Hacker Defender files we see here. There's a hidden table section, so any of those are going to be hidden. I'm also going to do NC asterisk. Why do you think I want to do that? Remember I used NC earlier? Netcat. So I'm going to hide netcat from being seen here also. And sometimes you'll rename cmd.exe to something else. So if I rename it to rcmd.exe, this will be a root process that can also be hidden. Here's some registry keys that are going to be hidden. Again, these will not be visible to the system using regedit. So I'm hiding my Hacker Defender keys. Very, very ingenious application here, and it's very difficult to get rid of it if somebody does rootkit you with Hacker Defender, and it's obvious to see why that is. Okay, let's see what else we got. We got in the registry values, there's a hidden registry value here for the startup run command. When we start the computer, it's going to run netcat, and it's going to run it over port 100, and it's going to also launch the command.exe for us. This is the amount of free space that we're going to advertise that we actually have, whether we do or not. And we're hiding port 100. We also have a password here. This is going to be my backdoor password that I can use at any time, hackers_rule. And so, I've got a great deal of help with this. And then for those of you from the Czech Republic, there's also all the Czech help that you need right there as well. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and get started with this one as well. All right. Now, how do we actually get this thing started? Well, we just double-click on hxdef100.exe. Now, once we go ahead and double-click on this file, we're going to have Hacker Defender running along with all of the parameters that we specified in that INI file. For example, what happened to the files I just had there? Well, remember that I was hiding certain kinds of files, anything that starts with hxdef. Well, once I launched Hacker Defender, it concealed those from Windows Explorer, so I cannot see them there anymore. Likewise, I will not be able to see hxdef if I go into Task Manager either. If I can get my right mouse click to work here. Task Manager, I'm not going to see, I'm going to sort this alphabetically. I'm not going to see any indication of Hacker Defender in here. Look, IL, there's no Hacker Defender going on here either. So we got pretty good sophistication in the way that thing works as well. And close that up now. So it's, again, a very good way of hiding itself from everything, and very difficult to get out of once you get infected with it, so to speak. Oh, I know another thing I need to show you. Let's go ahead and go to folders here, and I'm going to go to my C drive, and let's take a look at how much free hard disk space I have on C drive. It says I've got like 13 gigabytes worth of free space. That's because of the entry I put there in the free space parameter under that INI file that we were just editing. In reality, this is a virtual machine. I think it's got 4 gigabytes maximum. So again, I'm able to trick it into thinking that it's got more free hard disk space than it really does. All right, now here I've got another component to Hacker Defender, and that's this file, backdoor client 100. That's BDCLI 100. If I double-click on this file, it's going to ask me for the host that I'm trying to connect to, 10.10.10.42, I guess that is. Okay, can never seem to remember it. Anyway, 10.10.10.42. And I'll press enter there. And then it's asking what port I want to use. It hooks into every running process, so I can really use any port that I want to that's in use over there. Let's just go ahead and use 80, because I think I have a web server over there. So I'm going to use port 80, and I'll press enter here. And then it's asking me for my password, and what was that password that I used earlier? So I think that was hackers_rule. Hopefully that was right. Okay, so now it's going ahead, it's opening the back door, it's checking the back door. So we'll see that we got a successful connection there, and I can now use a connection from just about anywhere in the world that I have network connectivity through my firewall. And I probably will, because it's probably going to be opening port 80 to allow access to a web server, and now I'll be able to use backdoor access to that client at any time. Because obviously here I've made a connection, again, a command shell connection to that Windows 2000 box. I mean, this is my Windows XP box. You can tell by the start menu here and everything. But here it says Windows 2000. That's my remote system that I am now connected to. In this nugget, we discussed Windows exploits, and we started off with a couple of well-known attacks. One of those is the shatter attack, which relates to the Microsoft messaging queue that Microsoft was kind enough to provide us very clear clues about that we should look into. And then there was also the DCOM attack, which relates to the NetBIOS ports and the capability of sharing files in Windows file systems. And this is a long-standing weakness with those ports that you've heard me mention before, like 135, 139, 445. Well, those ports and vulnerabilities there still apply today. In fact, we were able to use the DCOM attack in one of our demos so that we could open up a command shell. And once you get to that, there's really not that much you're limited to. You don't get a pretty graphical user interface, but that's easy enough to fix, because I showed you how you could run VNC over there. And in addition, we could also use rootkit and give ourselves access to that system at any time, and it's virtually impossible to see or to remove that rootkit. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.